We're fortunate today to have a great roundtable of experts for you who are going to help us sort through these issues, and I think can probably approach this from just about any angle you could want. Leading the discussion will be Christina Samuels, to my left here. Christina is a staff writer at Education Week, where she covers district leadership issues and also authors the District Dossier blog on edweek.org. As many of you will know, before that, Christina reported for several years on special education, health, and behavior issues for Education Week. And now I'm going to turn things over, and Christina will introduce our panelists.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pretty excited about this panel. I feel like there are a lot of folks here who can talk about a lot of the topics that have been raised in earlier discussions. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to ask kind of a round of questions for folks, but please be sure to come up with your own as we're talking. Joining us today is Kevin Carey, the Policy Director for Education Sector. Mr. Carey's research at Education Sector includes higher education reform, improving college graduation rates, college rankings, community colleges, and the federal No Child Left Behind Act. Also on the panel, we have Clarice Summersall, who is an administrator at Montgomery College, a community college with 60,000 students and branches in Germantown, Rockville, and Tacoma Park. Ms. Summersall is a special assistant to the Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Services and has worked closely with workforce development issues for the college. We also have Joel Vargas with Jobs for the Future, which develops education and workforce strategies that help communities and states compete in a global economy. Mr. Vargas leads the organization's High School Through College initiative, and one of his focuses is early college and programs to get underrepresented students into post-secondary education. And finally, we're joined by Dr. Jerry Weiss, the superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools. Montgomery County Schools is the largest district in Maryland. It has 144,000 students. It's been at the top of the list in graduation rates, according to our research, for 3 years in a row. Dr. Weiss has been superintendent since 1999 and was named Superintendent of the Year in 2003, and he's retiring at the end of this school year. I'm going to start off again by asking some questions, and I'll just take a little moderator prerogative and start with Dr. Weiss first, because obviously you've been at the top of the list for 3 years in a row, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've done in Montgomery County to lead to that excellent graduation rate.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Education Week. It's a wonderful publication. I think we are lucky in our country to have these types of publications to help us who are actually on the ground, in the field, get to know what's going on across the country. It's good research, and I want to thank you to the sponsors who helped sponsor that. I've been a superintendent for 35 years. About 2 hours ago, I watched my first graders cross the stage at graduation. Richard Montgomery High School. All of our high schools now are in the top 3% in the nation, according to the Newsweek polls and many other polls. When I look at the PISA results, what I see is a difference between the socioeconomic issues and how poverty hits kids in America. Graduation started in preschool in Montgomery County. That's where it should start everywhere. I've got grandkids and I've got kids. I want them inspired, and I want them prepared. So let's talk about those two dimensions and what we did, Christina, to hit that 3 years in a row, and we're going to hit it another 3 years because this is our 08 class, and every class since then has even gotten better. Because what we did, we started in preschool to inspire children to get the skills. That's the preparation. And we really envisioned college preparatory skills for all kids. We didn't sort them. We need them reading. And we created this 7 keys that are predictive analytics. That's why I'm very supportive of these types of analytics. And got rid of all of the ways that we describe quality and success and chose one way for all children. And asked a simple question: how and under what conditions can we make that occur? We found 2 conditions that we had to really deal with. One was the engagement. If you're going to inspire people, they got to be engaged. And what we found is the teachers and the kids were neither engaged. Kids thought it was boring. Teachers thought we had created this thing to make it teacher-proof. So we've got people to work together in teams, units, families, if you will, and redid everything on a standards base that was more aligned with what you find internationally, and then spent a lot of money on retraining people to deliver. And in the retraining for people, what we learned is that the biggest problem we had was expectations. Expectations based on race or gender or socioeconomic or zip code, all those kind of things. So we had to retrain people not only to do the pedagogy, but also the inspiring and also the motivating. When we got that all going and built a value chain that you could actually have some metrics and measure it, kept track of it all, gave the proper support and training, our teachers then started to feed and weed poor performers out. There was a New York Times article about how our teachers really are conspiring to improve their teaching and pedagogy, as well as eliminate people who won't do those kind of things. And so you've got this value chain marching up. So it starts in preschool. It has to be consistent all the way through. You have to have good expectations. You have to inspire and motivate as well as prepare. And that takes a systemic structure. And more importantly, it takes a culture undergirding that of high expectations for every child. That's what's happening. And now it's happening in all of our schools. And the impact of poverty, socioeconomic, in your zip code is a lot less than it's ever been in our system. That's why all of our groups are over the top as far as the graduation rate.
Well, that's fantastic news for Montgomery County, and I hope that we'll have some questions to ask more about that. And I wanted to also shift a little bit, Joel, to talk about early colleges. I wrote about early colleges in this issue of Diplomas Counts, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the work that you've done with early colleges and what goes into making a successful program for students and perhaps creating a different pathway for those kids.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks to Ed Week for hosting this really important, provocative day. Pleasure to be a part of it. So, let me just start with the premise that Jobs for the Future really does believe and understand and pursue a mission where we create stronger routes to post-secondary degrees or credentials for all sorts of students, but especially on students who've been underserved by our education systems. And the work that I focus on is really focused on youth who are in high school who are at risk of not completing high school or going on to a post-secondary education. So, the thought with early college in some ways I think is a holder for a couple of the contradictory kind of the tensions that we heard in some of the discussions today, particularly between Amy and Ron. How do you build differentiated routes to those degrees and credentials, without creating a tracking system and that is to state it in the positive, to ensure that students have a core set of knowledge and skills that will keep the doors open to further education or whatever future they want to pursue. So the thought with early college schools and the one that you feature, Christina, is a really good one. It's one of roughly 247 in the country. These were started as small schools with all the sorts of personalized features that Michelle talked about that are so important to young people. And the unique approach was to enable students to be able, and we're talking about a high-risk population, to be able to complete high school and a post-secondary credential, an AA degree, up to an AA degree, usually 1 to 2 years of college credit, by the time they graduated within 4 to 5 years. And those schools are showing really good results. There are a lot more outcomes that we're gathering about them. To our surprise, the design initially was to really aspire to an AA and transferable college credit. We discovered a lot of schools, including the one that you featured in Michigan, also developed, in addition to focusing on a college-ready core and also transferable college credit, routes that led to degrees and certificates that were less than an AA, leading to an AA, in all sorts of areas as an enhancement to that design. And as we are now, and I can talk about this a little bit more later, as we try to take the success that we're seeing in these small early college high schools and see how we can translate that to whole districts to use it as a lever to create pathways to prosperity, if you will, for all high school students in any district. And we have a couple of proof points of this. We think that the early college approach is a really promising one to be able to both deliver on, creating differentiated routes to degrees that matter, and also allowing students to have a core of academic skills and knowledge that will allow them to move on to further education if they so wish to pursue it.
Sure. Well, one of the important things with early college high schools is having this kind of tight partnership with the community college partner. And Clarice, you could probably talk about the partnerships that Montgomery College has with Montgomery County Schools, with the university systems in Maryland, the things that you all do to sort of strengthen those ties amongst yourselves to create good transitions and pathways for students.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Clarice Summersall, and as Christina indicated, I'm the Special Assistant to the Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Services at Montgomery College. In that regard, I work very closely with the Vice Presidents and Provost of the 3 campuses, college-wide deans, as well as the school system and the university system of Maryland, represented by the universities at Shady Grove, where 9 of the system schools reside. Partnerships have never been more important. If we're talking about providing alternatives for students leaving high school and going on to higher education, it's not necessarily going to a 4-year institution. It might be going to a vocational school, a trade school, or a community college. And half of the undergraduates in the United States start in the community college. We're not just talking about low-income students. We're talking about students of means whose parents may have a lot of money, but the money is directed elsewhere, or students who have done extraordinarily well in the high school and their parents don't have enough money to send them directly to a 4-year institution. Many of those students come to Montgomery College. So at Montgomery College, we pride ourselves on saying that we are the community's college, that we serve the haves and the have-nots, the students who do have the requisite skills but no money to go on to a 4-year research-based institution, as well as those students who come to us from 170 different countries. 25% of the students from Montgomery County Public Schools come to us directly after they graduate from high school. Within 2 years, 40% of the students are at Montgomery College. And for those students who graduate from high school and enroll in higher education within the state, 60% of MCPS students come to us. As I indicated before, partnerships are so important. We have ongoing dialogues with our counterparts from MCPS on curricular alignment, on creating the optimal learning environment for our students, providing them with opportunities to explore careers early on, welcoming the students to our 3 campuses so that they have an idea of what higher education is all about when they're in elementary school, when they're in middle school, providing a full array of opportunities for those students if they want enrichment when they're in elementary school. We have a youth program that is second to none that is operated through our Workforce Development and Continuing Education unit. In addition to looking at MCPS as one of our primary partners, we also look at the other end of the totem pole and looking at University System of Maryland. Just yesterday, our campus provost, the Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Services, myself, our Director of Admissions, sat down with University of Maryland College Park to talk about curricular alignment, to talk about their general education program and new standards that they're going to be implementing. They wanted us to be at the table before the ink dried so that we could provide input. We're very much involved in our business community. Just last week, I attended a session where people who have been involved in the information technology area sat around the table talking about the best way to provide advice, both to faculty within higher education as well as high school teachers. We are in the business of partnerships.
This is great. Kevin, you know, you and I spoke a little bit earlier about the quality of post-secondary education. One of the issues that would be coming up is certainly if we have a number of more kids who are going into some kind of post-secondary training, what is going to be the quality of those programs that they go into? And I wonder if you could talk a little bit maybe about what you might be seeing there, maybe if there's some policy prescriptions or things that are going on in terms of improving the programs, the community colleges and for-profit colleges that these students would be going into.
Sure. It's been interesting to note in, I think, just the last few years, we've started to get out of the habit of talking about pathways to college and begun to talk about pathways to college degrees, because those aren't the same thing. It recognizes the fact that college is not just a magical destination, that if you get to it, your life will be fine, that many students who engage in higher education do not succeed there, and that while inadequate high school preparation is often a major contributing factor to lack of success in higher education, so too is the variable quality of colleges themselves. From a policy standpoint, however, I think we're still pretty much stuck at pathway to college. There's just not much that happens either at the state or the federal level to really dial into the question of whether or not individual colleges and universities are in fact doing all that they can do to help students of, as we know, widely diverse backgrounds and levels of academic preparation to do as well as possible. It's a different environment. We're talking about adults, albeit young adults, not children. The balance of responsibility between the institution and the individual shifts toward the individual as they age. But it's not as if in the summer between when you graduate from high school and start college that all of a sudden you become a completely different person and the educational institution in which you enroll bears no responsibility at all. However, we still have very little in the way of processes or instruments for knowing how much students learn in college. We have no real accountability systems in the way that we understand the phrase accountability system. Around college learning, we're doing better on college completion. And of course, as you alluded to just last week, the U.S. Department of Education finalized really in a lot of ways, a historic set of regulations called the Gainful Employment Regulations that are really tied to post-graduation outcomes in the labor market. All the debate around gainful employment, and if you lived here in the Washington, D.C. area, you can't miss it because it's been on billboards and in the newspaper and one of those kind of inescapable lobbying frenzies that comes up around, debit card rates or, aircraft engines or what have you. All the focus has been around for-profit colleges. And there have been these kind of lurid sort of stories in the media about abuses, many of them very real, in for-profit colleges and congressional hearings and all the rest of it. And what gets missed, I think, in this conversation is that of the 55,000 some programs that are going to be subject to this gainful employment regulation, most of them are not in for-profit colleges. Most of them are in public colleges, disproportionately in community colleges. They apply to any program that has a vocational focus, which, as we know, is one of the major missions of community colleges, along with the transfer mission and the non-credit mission and about
Yes.
4 other missions. There's a lot of missions.
There are a lot of
in
missions.
community colleges. But the fact of the matter is that most students who go to college, either at a 2-year or a 4-year college, go to college primarily to prepare for a career. It's not the only reason they go to college, but it's the primary reason they go to college. And even in the 4-year college sector, if you look at the things that students major in, the far and away the most popular major is business. And then you have education, and you have accounting, and you have engineering, and these large, essentially vocational areas of preparation. Well, it's perfectly reasonable to ask whether or not, in the aggregate, students who are preparing for careers succeed there, and it's perfectly reasonable to look at the kinds of jobs they get and how much money they make as one measure, one important measure of the quality of that preparation. So I think that we're kind of moving into a new era now. The fact of this regulation that has been mostly on this 10% of the sector, the for-profit sector, is going to create a vast new capacity for the federal government to collect information about earnings. And that in turn will allow us to ask new questions about the quality of education that students are receiving.
It's interesting. You know, there was an interesting conversation that we had earlier today talking about preparation as students are going through high school, the different kinds of career exposure that they might be getting, whether they are exposed to simply one path that have, you know, four-year college or and nothing else is kind of the right thing, or if they're exposed to a lot of different pathways. You know, I wonder what's going on in Montgomery County schools with that. What kind of exposures do students get to, you know, multiple post-secondary options? If that's something that is sort of a policy initiative that comes from central office, or is that the more on an ad hoc basis in different schools, or how that works?
No, we don't leave anything to chance at all, because if you do, it won't get done. You know, I'm amazed that we're having this debate about whether kids want to go or not. You know, it's a lot of research out there and polling. About 90% of the parents want their kids to go, and about 90% of the kids want to go. And the fact isn't whether they want to go, is how prepared are they to go. And that preparation, again, is about preparation and inspiration. So your question is more about the inspiration. The inspiration drives preparation, if you think about it. So we talk about multiple career pathways and all kinds of things about how you have to get ready for something if you want what everybody wants in the world, and that's a job. It's more than just living in your parents' basement. It's actually getting a job that inspires you, that you feel passionate about. And so what we do is a lot of that early in the early childhood education and the K through 5 education. It doesn't wait till secondary school. And in the middle schools, we're looking for ways electronically to hook things up. At the high schools, we've organized our businesses to come in and have professional conferences with kids where kids go out. We call it 720 conference because there's only 720 days in high school. You think you're going to get them there, you've got to get them back here where you've got more time. Besides that, if they don't get the math and the language arts down here, they won't get it up here. So it is about preparation and inspiration, and it's about showing them multiple pathways. By the time they get to the high school, we have all kinds of tools, techniques, and ways to keep them motivated. Because if they're not inspired, they're not going anywhere, Christine. They're not going to do it because you want them to do it. They're certainly not going to do it because the federal government wants them to do it. They're not going to do it because the state has a testing regimen. They're not going to do it because they don't even know me, because I want them to do it. They're going to do it because they're inspired to do it because they see themselves in that vision. And it's up to us to create the structures to do that. And those structures have to be systemically, so it isn't your zip code, your race, or your background that gets you exposure. That's what's been the wrong in the past.
Can I
Yeah,
piggyback
please,
on this one?
please
I
do.
really like that. The inspiration creates preparation.
Yeah.
I would also flip it and say to build off the theme I think Michelle also hit upon earlier, which is the preparation can build the inspiration too. We're
Got to go
finding
hand
in
together.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the more successful students are, and this is kind of the part of the power of an early college model is when students actually, what we've seen from some of our research is when students succeed at a college level in a course, and be it a career and technically oriented course or a gen ed course, what we found is that really does have an effect on their sense of self-efficacy and academic identity, and sense of themselves as being someone who can actually go on to do more post-secondary education. We think that has something to do with some of the research, although it's not completely definitive, but I think they all point in the same direction, that students in high school who get some early exposure to key college courses, whether in CTE or gen ed, actually do better in post-secondary education when they enroll compared to similar peers.
I want to come back as a rejoiner. Be careful that you don't do too much. Activity does not necessarily translate into productivity. And we get that confused. Activity is sometimes a one-way street that goes nowhere. So you're pointing somewhere. What programs that we have with MC point somewhere. And Kevin, we try to point them to some place. We keep track of college and our kids all the way through college. And we can tell them where to. They may not have as much possibility as you might think. Not all colleges are equal, folks. Some colleges have huge washout rates. And so you really need to take a look at that. You need to have a value chain. Again, starts in preschool, goes all the way up through work. And if you're not keeping track of it, it won't happen by chance.
One of the things that we're doing within the county is identifying possible pathways for students early on, so that when they're in elementary school, they start thinking about what they need to do in terms of rigor for middle school. And when they're in middle school, they start thinking about what they need to be doing in terms of rigor and preparation for high school. When they're in high school, they start thinking about what they can do for post-secondary, whether it's coming to Montgomery College or going on to University Systems of Maryland. In order to undergird that in our promotion, we talk about that educational pathway. What happens with so many students today is that we talk about just the full array of professions that they can go into, that so many students are stymied early on because they don't know how to get into a lane to prepare them for the next step. So by giving students an opportunity to explore various avenues and painting out possible pathways for them, we're seeing real results. It happens in a very logical and strategic way, as Dr. Wiest has indicated. It's not something that happens as happenstance.
You know, there was an early bit of discussion about whether college for all has meant a 4-year degree, college for everyone, or just some kind of post-secondary education. And, you know, Kevin, I wonder if whether we are in the midst, or what you see, whether we're in the midst of college for all students, 4 years, college for most, some kind of post-secondary. I mean, where is some of the debate going on with that topic?
Sure. Well, it was up on the screen earlier this morning. It said, college for all, ? And I find that to be kind of a little confusing. I think the all in that sentence is sort of a straw man. I don't know who's in favor of college for all. And in fact, we have an administration here in DC and a number of prominent foundations, one of which underwrote the conversation today, that have made very clear statements about their goals, which are college for more, but more meaning going from roughly 40% of the adult population having a degree of some kind to 60% over the next 10 years. So that would be a big change, but 60% is not 100%. And I think that that recognizes the diversity of goals and aspirations and potentiality and the nature of the economy and all the rest of it. So I think the question of whether there should be college for more is a more realistic and a more interesting question. I personally think there absolutely should be college for more. I think if you look at a lot of the economic data that this year's Quality Counts issue is based on comes from Georgetown University's projections of the needs of the economy, and they project that we're actually going to produce, if we only stay at our current pace, 3 million fewer college graduates by 2018 than the economy will actually need. So I think that's the challenge in front of us, and we need to recognize that the students who are in that margin between 40 and 60%, they're not going to Harvard. They're probably not even going to University of Maryland College Park. They're going to be going to our community colleges. A number of them will be in for-profit colleges and universities, which are not going to be abolished. And so we need to think hard about the policy mechanisms, the type of research, and the way of thinking about what success for those kind of students looks like, what they need, and how we can provide it to them as Dr. Weiss said, on a continuum all the way from the beginning to the degree.
Sure. I'm going to pause in my questions right there and open it up to the audience. If there are any questions there, I just wanted to ask if you could wait for someone with a microphone to come to you and introduce yourself first. And we have questioned everybody out.
Anybody here from the foundations, the Lumina Foundation, the Mott Foundation?
Yep. Wait, we got one
What,
question.
are you
first.
from Mott or Lumina? Lumina. Are you guys working on anything on this inspiration to, one of the things that I've got in my head right now is, and I'm trying to get some foundations together for this, so I'm trying an idea out for you. All our kids are on Facebook.
I get this a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
So.
No. I've already got people that are joining in. We're actually helping design, and I'm about to talk to Google. And our kids are all on Facebook. They have profiles. They put their own stuff in their profiles. There would be a little icon when they're in their profile that comes up, here's some jobs you need to think about, or here's some future that you need to think about. We need to start using this social networking stuff to really spread, not any propaganda, not any advertising, but the idea that you're worth something. Your life is worth something. And you can attach it to something. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. And that's, we need foundations to get into that, to help kids.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about social media as a tool to do that, to your point. And the interesting thing about social media that philanthropy is still grappling with is that a lot of philanthropy still sees social media as sort of an extension of the internet, which it's not.
No,
the internet is a web of pages. Social media is a web of people.
Right.
It's a very different concept. And this idea of social networking and what that web of people can really bring to this issue of motivation, of an ability to navigate your way through the system, and frankly, of peer-based interaction, which I think is hugely important, is something that we're wrestling with. We've actually organized some conversations among various student-based organizations and entities to try to get a better handle on that, or organizations that deal with fairly recent graduates, to get a sense of how we can actually really make the case. Because as you said earlier, the aspiration for college is at an all-time high. Aspiration isn't really the issue.
Right.
It's ability to navigate the system, and it's also making sure that the more recent messaging, unfortunate messaging that we've seen about is college worth it, which I think is a disastrous message for the 21st century students, the low income and the first generation and the minority and other populations, gets handled in a way that's not sort of authority figures telling younger people this is what you should do. That's the surest way to ensure that they don't do it. So finding a way to use the social networking movement as a way to create that web of people is something that we've been talking about.
I agree. I agree totally.
I wanted to jump in off of that. So college, is it worth it? Disastrous message? Or
Absolutely.
What?
Oh my God, we have created the biggest sorting mechanism in the United States, and it's the public education. We sort by socioeconomic, we sort by race. We've been doing it ever since we started. If we don't put that on the table, we're going to have serious problems in this country. Again, I unpacked the PISA results. Don't take my word for it. Talk to them. They will tell you the impact of poverty is huge on kids. And we're sending them a message now, okay, it's too expensive, you can't go. At the same time, we're starving to death. Our companies are starving to death for people to take these jobs. So no, I don't think college, probably from the quote unquote Ivy, whatever, is what we're talking about. We're talking about preparation.
Yes.
Preparation gives you options, how to learn, how to be inspired, how to move yourself. And if we send a mixed message right now, we're really hurting. I mean, I've traveled India, China, you talk to it. They're not sending mixed messages, but they can sort because they got 1 billion people, folks.
That's right.
You got less than 50 million in the American education According to your diploma counts, we're only getting 70% of them through. According to what we hear from the colleges, only less than a third of them are prepared. Better check your Social Security check if we don't start checking into this. And that's why I say we need to use more tools. We need to both inspire and prepare, and I agree with you, Joel, they're intertwined. Sorry about my preaching. You know.
Quite all right.
Kenneth Ward, College Bound again. It's amazing to me because bringing it local,
Yeah.
Washington, D.C.'s at the bottom of the list, 43%. You're retiring.
Yeah.
First question, have you thought about coming south?
I came up from North Carolina.
I'm from North Carolina.
Yeah,
so
good.
there you have it.
I merged systems.
What are we
down there.
not doing? What is D.C. not doing? Well, we've gone through superintendent after chancellor after superintendent.
Well, look at the
What are we
morning
not doing?
paper. You're just now put in time for a curriculum. We get everything, excuse me, and I'm retiring so I can say things that need to be said. We get it all backwards, folks. You start with a curriculum. You don't start with tests. The curriculum ought to lead you somewhere that is aspirational and you want to go and the kid wants to go. And the teacher believes that's what they're leading for. Then you build a curriculum to do that, then the metrics to support that, then you support the organization to deliver that, and then you execute on it with scale, quality, and don't overrun your capacity. I read in the morning paper you're just starting on a curriculum. That'd be one thing that probably you had something missing.
One of the things that we haven't talked about today, but it's been pretty apparent, at least as long as I've been in education, is that you have to ensure that students not only have the academic wherewithal to secure jobs, but they have to be prepared with skills to secure jobs as well. So something that we haven't talked about today, but it's been in the room, is talking about skills and knowledge as a foundation for everything. We already know that students are going to be moving from career to career, not just job to job. So preparing them for a narrowly focused career is not the answer. Making sure that they have the foundational skills to be prepared for whatever careers come along is the answer to the situation. We haven't discussed that yet today, but to me that's core. And that's what you're talking about, inspiring the students, giving them opportunities so that they can explore their options and then being prepared. One of the things that we talk about at the community college is that we will take students wherever they are when they come to us, and we will provide endless possibilities. That's our little tagline, endless possibilities. And we do have students from 170 different countries, some students who might have had a career in their homeland. I know that when I taught, I had students who were nurses, teachers, criminal, lawyers, who were coming to learn English as their third or fourth language, thank you very much. We provided the opportunity for them to engage and become part of the American workforce. So when you're talking about preparation, when you're talking about inspiration, when you're talking about opportunities, it all starts with the foundation, and the foundation is knowledge and skills for whatever they want to do.
Oh, I'm sorry, we were going to try to get another question in.
Yeah, my name is Kelly Worthington from the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Programs, and we've been talking a lot about SES and race, ethnicity, and gender. No one's talking about students with disabilities as another risk group, and the majority of students with disabilities either have a speech-language delay or learning disability. I was just really curious if any of you are making efforts to reach out to the disability community as part of that improvement effort of encouraging students with disabilities.
Yeah, I think you're going to find most school systems are, because it's an ever-growing group. They're 12 to 15% of a school system, sometimes in some systems 20%. They're all our kids. And it isn't whether you're going to make it to this level of preparation. It is maybe the type of differentiation you need to do with the pathway and support system to do that. You see, what hasn't changed since any of you were in school is the number of days in school. It hasn't changed. But what you need to know and be able to do has changed, if you think about it. Because many of you might not have made it through college because you couldn't have turned in the college cutoff scores. Think about it. The kids we're graduating today have to have a real high cutoff score on things that may or may not make any difference, but they use it again to sort. So you have to have preparation and inspiration, or you're not going to go anywhere. Because if you're very inspired but not prepared, you're going to feel good but can't get through it. If you're very prepared but not inspired, you may not even go, or you may drop out. You have to have both of these. That means you have to have the structure and the culture, both. So if time is going to be a limiting factor, we're going to have to be a whole lot more on our value chain coherent. And we're going to have to use time much better. And we can't sort because we don't have enough kids in the country to run the country if we sort like we used to. It's a whole big thing. That's why these diplomas count. I particularly want you to add another dimension. It's one thing getting a diploma, but is it worth anything? That's the second thing we ought to add on that.
Any more questions from the audience? You know, I'm glad that you asked the special education question because that was my former beat. I know that post-secondary transition planning is a huge issue for students with disabilities. But anyway, another question? Oh, okay. Well, if you could just wait for a microphone.
Hi, you know, you cite a lot of the international models of countries that are doing well, and looking at some of those, they're doing what you're doing in Montgomery County.
No, we're doing what they're doing.
Well, you're doing okay. But in many parts of this country, we're not looking at those models of success, and we're sort of reinventing things that are doubling down on things that have proven not to work for the last 10 or 20 years. It feels like we're stuck. And how do we get unstuck with a strategy for success? We have, you know, examples of success right here in our backyard, right in the nation's capital. The Post is always pointing to different leaders with a different message than your message in Montgomery County, even though it's right there under their nose. I'm just, what's the problem with all that? I mean, how do you explain the politics of this that are preventing us from actually joining together around everyone's very good intention to actually improve
We
the
really
system?
haven't got enough energy behind that we're going to have increased volume of quality. We're still very comfortable in our country with differential funding methodology between the states, the gaming of the test, the materials that are pretty low quality. You know, I looked at Israel, for example, and Israel is a small piece of land and it's got a lot of sand and they have a lot of immigration, and guess what? Our kids would have a hard time with their materials because their materials are very high. So it is your materials, it is your support, it is getting behind your educators and supporting them. You need not go farther. You can go look at Toronto. There's some fine examples up in Canada, and Michael Fullen, and some of the work that he's produced that we read but don't actually apply. I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to have to take it on systemically. We're going to have to not get off of all these little activities, and here's the silver bullet, and here's the guru coming through town. This is a systemic, coherent value chain that we're going to have for large numbers of children, and we're going to have to be able to execute it at scale and afford it as a country. If we don't, we're going to be seriously short of a workforce.
You know, Kevin, could you talk to that a little bit about what you see as maybe some of the challenges that are coming from, you know, maybe adopting other models of success that you see in other, that we're seeing in other countries, and what, I guess, hampers that perhaps from taking off in the States?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is just that this is all a very complex, multidimensional system, and the different pieces depend on the other pieces, and so you can single out one piece of it in another more successful country and say that works, but whether it's a good idea to bring it here depends in part on whether you could bring some of the other dependent pieces along with you. You know, a couple of years ago, I had a chance to go and visit and look at the education system in Finland, for example, which is often looked at because they have the highest PISA scores in the world, or maybe Shanghai was ahead of them.
I was going to say Shanghai passed them this year.
And you know, one of the things that they have a very sort of well-developed narrative for why it is that they've been so successful, and they basically say, well, look, we have very little income inequality and a strong social welfare state. Basically, nobody is poor in Finland. We have we have even school funding, right? We don't have this kind of first state to local and now kind of lightly federal to state system of funding education that produces lots of inequality between different areas. Everyone basically gets the same amount of money, and they have a very strong teaching force. All of the teachers are unionized. They all have to basically get a master's degree from the high-level selected universities. And you put all those pieces together, and it works, and they don't really need a coercive standard system or testing or anything like that. Well, I think we're probably some distance from being a Nordic social welfare state in this country, and there are a lot of kids in school right now, and will probably enroll and graduate and, who knows, retire before we get there. The quality of the teaching and the teacher workforce they have is in a lot of ways dependent on a self-sustaining ethic of respect within society. People want to be a teacher in Finland because teachers are respected. Teachers are respected in Finland because they're very good. Teachers are very good because the good people go into teaching. So how do you kind of shoot in and start to change those cycles, and how you think about how the different pieces may or may not be translatable to a different environment is a very tough question. I would love to go after the teacher education part of it, because all the research that we're so familiar with suggests that the quality of teaching is so important in our school system. But that would mean some big changes in our higher education system as well. We don't have a system that's constructed such that the elite selected universities are substantially in the business of teacher preparation. They study education, but they don't really practice it from a teacher training standpoint. We could do that, but that would mean different values, different funding, different things.
I think we're probably getting on the edge to start thinking about it, Christine. And I would ask Kevin, I mean, the Common Core, one of the things when you discover what's going on.
That's the core thing.
That's right, that's right. When you discover what's going on in the other industrialized countries of the world, or the world that is moving forward, they have kind of a Common Core curriculum. And that's what I was talking about with Washington, D.C. You start with your curriculum. What do you want children to be able to know and be able to do? Okay, when they exit. And we don't have that. We have 50 states, 14,000 systems, all kinds of political subdivisions. And it just becomes so factionalized, going into 4,000 to 5,000 universities with huge differential kinds of things that they look at. And that is not coherence.
You also have a very decoupled, pardon the interruption, but decoupled higher ed and K-12 system, which is why we decided we needed some common standards to understand how to align, what students need.
Well, but so the real challenge that I think hasn't been discussed enough is we say that we're going to create standards that are going to prepare students for college as if college was one thing.
Right.
When in fact every college is different, and they decide for themselves pretty much with very little in the way of a policy infrastructure or input from anyone outside the institution what their standards are. You could go to the president of colleges and ask them what their standards are, and I think it would be hard for them to tell you because they basically delegate that down to the departmental level. And so I'm a big enthusiast of the Common Core and the assessments that are being developed along with it. I think it's an important step for the nation educationally, but we haven't really gotten to the point of engaging with college to the extent that we need to.
A prime example of that, go ahead.
I'm about to say, you can obviously see this could go on for another 45 minutes, but I'm afraid that we have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panel for participating.
I think Christina said it. This is a great discussion, and these really are some of the most important and fundamental challenges we're facing as a nation, as an education system. And so it's too bad we don't have more time, but we don't. So this is going to conclude today's event. Just a couple quick housekeeping things. For those of you who are watching online, thank you for joining us as well. The video from the webcast will be archived and will be up on edweek.org in a few days. So if you're interested in kind of checking it out later, please do take a look at that. Again, if you're interested in anything from the report, you'll find that at www.edweek.org. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we're looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thanks.